We've got our feet.
We can do this. No, I looked on the thing and I was like, it cannot just be Alex, so I'm here. Why are you sorry? Oh yeah, you should.
I believe in your abilities.
Okay. Or even if there's like an old outline.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying this new.
What?
Yai-di-di-dai-dai-dai-do,
Yai-di-di-dai-dai-dai-dai-do, yai-di-di-dai-dai-dai-do, ai-ai-do, ai-di-di-dai-dai-dai-do, yai-di-di-dai-dai-dai-dai-do, ai-di-di-dai-dai-dai-do, ai-ai-dai-dai-dai-do, ai-dai-dai-dai-do,
Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone.
Shalom.
Lovely, quiet, warm Shabbat morning, and it's nice to have you all here, and welcome people at home as well that are viewing from home. And if for some reason you just stumbled here and you don't know where you are online, we're at HEA in Denver, Colorado, and we use Sidur Lev Shalem, which you can find on our website. We'll begin with words of gratitude for a new day, for the renewal of our spirits. As we turn to page
103.
99.
103.
99.
99.
Yeah.
99.
Modeh ani lefanecha melechai vekayam modeh lefanecha melechai vekayam modeh lefanecha We warm up our voices and our souls in the Psalms of Psuke de Zimra, beginning on page 122. We rise for Baruch Shamar. Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu. Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hoseh Bereshit, Baruch Omer Ve'oseh, Baruch Ozer Umekayem, Baruch Merachem al haaretz, Baruch Merachem al habriot, Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov Lereah, Baruch Haila'ad V'kayam Lanetzach, Baruch Podeh U'Matzil, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech Mehulal Batishpachot, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu. You may be seated. Page 134. Shabbat is the culmination of creation. We say in the words of Lecha Dodi, Sof b'maaseh u'machshavat chigla, that it was the last of creation, but the first in conception. That God's whole purpose of creation was to bring us to Shabbat. It's the apex of creation. To all of the works of creation lead us to this moment of refrain of Shabbat. And so the Psalm of Shabbat is a psalm of praise for God's creations. Page 134. Let's sing together a melody we haven't sung in a while. Mizmor shir leyom hashabbat, tov lehodol Adonai. Mizmor shir leyom hashabbat, uzamer leshimcha elyon, lehagid baboker chasecha, ve'emunatcha ba'elon, lehagid baboker chasecha, ve'emunatcha ba'elon. Mizmor shir leyom hashabbat, tov lehodol Adonai. Mizmor shir leyom hashabbat, uzamer leshimcha elyon, lehagid baboker chasecha, ve'emunatcha ba'elon, lehagid baboker chasecha, ve'emunatcha ba'elon. Page 136. Ashrei yoshvei veitecha. How fortunate are those who dwell in God's home. And as people still are viewing from home, we want to remind you how we are reopening in a safe and responsible way, taking guidance from expertise, and also, I think there's also a psychological aspect that isn't just about the technical. That being together is a readjustment that we all have to make, and I firmly believe that the only way we do it is by doing it. There's no way that we think our way out of this. We have to feel our way through it and do it, and then feel the discomfort, and then do it again and feel it a little bit less, and then do it again and start to reacquaint ourselves with other human beings. And that's the nature of community and life. So we invite folks who are viewing at home to come to shul. Feel safe and embraced by a community of mutual responsibility and care, and give thanks for this community. Ashrei, page 136. Hannah, you want to lead us? Go for it.
Ashrei, yoshvei veitecha, od hallelujah, od hallelujah.
Ashrei,
Ashrei,
yoshvei,
yoshvei veitecha, od hallelujah, od hallelujah. Ashrei,
yoshvei,
yoshvei veitecha, od hallelujah, od hallelujah.
Ashrei,
Ashrei,
yoshvei,
yoshvei veitecha, od hallelujah, od hallelujah.
Page 141. Hallelujah. Oh, this is a different melody, isn't it? For different songs.
It is, but I think we can
Is
do
it?
it.
You can do it, yeah.
Oh, no, it is, you're right, it's not this one.
Yeah. Which melody should we hear?
We can just go with
Hallelujah, 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 bekodsho, hallelujah, bekirozo, hallelujah, הנשמה, הללוהו בצל תרועה, כל הנשמה תהלליה, הנשמה תהלליה. הללו, 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 הללו,
Let's turn now to page 145, and we'll try this melody together. Let's see if we can remember. Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. 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 Page 147. Shochenad maharom vekadosh shemo vekatuv ranenu tzadikim bananai l'sharim nava tehila befi yesharim titalal udivrei tzadikim titbarach uvishon chasidim titromam uvekerev kedoshim titkadash ubemakalot revevot amcha beit Yisrael berina utfarshim chamalken bechol dor vador sheken chovat kol ersim lefanach Adonai Eloheinu v'lohevotenu להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, לעלה ולקלס על כל דברי שירות בתשבחות. דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך, ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. המלך הגדול בשמיים, שישבח הלל וזמרה אוזן שלו. ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות, אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אל העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם לעולם לעולמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר, וירומם, ויתנשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירה בעלמה, ואמרו Amen. Remain standing, page 149. Baruchu et Adonai, Hamevorach. Baruch Adonai, Hamevorach, Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvarech hoshach Oseh shalom uvoreh et hakol. You may be seated. Hakol yaducha v'chol yeshvucha v'chol kadosh kadonai hakol yemuseh la'yotzer hakol ha'el p'tuach b'chol yom zelatot sharim mizrach. אין כרכך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי עולם הבא. אפס פלטך גואלנו למות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. 151. אל אדון על כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה. גדלו וטובו מלא עולם, דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו. המתגאה חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד, על מרכבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל כוח
השמש ויזרח אורה והתקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו כל צבע מרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים בחיות הקודש ידי ידי
we continue quietly. ליל אשר שבת מכל המעשים, ביום השביעי התהלל וישב על כיסא כבודו, תפארת אתה ליום מלאכה, עונה קרא ליום שבת ששבע שכל יום השביעי שבו שבת. תתברך מושיענו על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מראה אור שעשית יפרוך הסלע. תתברך צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו, בורא קדושים ישתבח שם כל מלכנו. We'll join together at the arrows on 153. Olivia, would you like to lead us? No? Alex?
I'm good, you can do it.
Kulam ahuvim. Hannah, do you want to do it? Go for it.
כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים וכולם עושים בהמה וברע רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה ומברכים ופשבחים ומפארים ומריצים ומקדישים וממליכים
את שם האל המלך הגדול הגיבור והנורא קדוש הוא.
וכולם מקבלים עליכם המלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות אל הזה להקדיש לטרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ונעימה קדושה, כולם כחדונים ואומרים ביראה.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו.
והאופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מנסים למצרפים, ומתם משבחים ואומרים
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
חי וקיים זמירות יאמרו תשבחות ישירו, כי הוא לבדו בגבולתו עושה חדשות ומלכות צורת הכל מצמיח ישועות ברכו. שכמות בזמן חסדו
אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
On page 154, Ahava Rabbah speaks of God's love for us, a love that's expressed in Torah, whose intention it is to give us instruction for living in a complex world, a sometimes tumultuous world. We'll be speaking about this a little bit later in Parshat Korach, the kind of division that exists in society that is both productive and also sometimes difficult. But the difference between those two is whether we're driven by love or not. If our love is for one another and for a greater good, then that is a machloket l'shem shamayim. That's division for the sake of heaven. And so we remind ourselves that the purpose of law, the purpose of Torah, is to bring greater love between people and between us and God. Page 154, Hannah, would you lead us again?
Ahava,
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 ותרחם עלינו, אבינו מלכנו בעבור, רבותינו שבתנו. רחם עלינו ותן בלבנו להבין, להשכיל, לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והביאנו לשלום מרבה כנפות הארץ. Bring us together from the four corners of the earth, ותלכנו לארצנו, ילבשינו ותל ורחבתו.
Baruch, Baruch, Adonai, Habocher, Be'amo Yisrael, Be'ahava.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meotecha vehayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך וקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בעיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך והיה אם שמוע תשמעו על מצוותיה אשר כן מצווכם היום ואהבה את אלוהיכם בכל מקום כוסף סבירך ונתתי סבירך. ויאמר אלוהים משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל מצא להם ועשו להם ציצית הכנפי בידיהם לדורתם ונאמרו על ציצית כנף פתיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית ראיתם אותו זכרתם מכל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם אחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריכם למען תזכרו ועשיתם מכל מצוותיי ואתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אדוני אלוהיכם אמן Adonai Elohechem Emet V'yatzim nekom v'kayam yeshav v'namam 157 Ledor vador ukayam ushmo kayam v'chiso nachon u'malchuto ve'emunato le'ad kayamet udvarav chaimim kaimim nemanim nechmadim le'ad olamei alamim al avotinu v'alinu v'albanim v'torotinu v'al dor zer Yisrael avdecha al rishonim achrim Emet she'atarna Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu, Malkeinu melech avotenu goraleinu gorel avotenu, Yotzernu tzu Yeshuatenu, Podeinu motzilenu me'olam shemecha, Ein Elohim zulatecha, Ezrat avotenu atahu me'olam, Magenu shechol davaro.
You want to do Emet?
Can we do it? Yeah.
Sure.
Can you lead it?
Sure.
Okay.
It's my favorite.
Okay, great.
Emet. 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 Emet atahu rishon, atahu aharon, umiladedecha. Emet atahu rishon, atahu aharon, umibaladecha. Elanu melech, elanu melech, Uriah, Moshiach, Emet atahu rishon, atahu aharon, umibaladecha. Emet atahu rishon, atahu aharon, umibaladecha. Emet. 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 Emet.
Thank you. We continue quietly, page 158. We'll join together at the arrows. Mimitzrayim galtanu Adonai, and mi beit avodim b'tatanu, kol v'rachacham ha'atayim. At the arrows on 158.
Tehilot le'el elyon
Baruch hu mevorach, Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael, lechanu shira besimcha rabba, ve'amru kulam micha mocha ba'elim Adonai micha mocha nedar b'kodesh norat tehilot osef elef shira hadasha shivuk kebulim lesimcha Yisrael, Uvdein Kumecha, Yehuda Yisrael, Golenu Adonai Tzvaot, Shemo Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai,
Page 159, we'll begin the Amidah together, and then we invite you to continue quietly through the remainder of the Amidah through page 166. Adonai, Sefatai Tiftach, Ufi Agi, Tehilatecha. Sefatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Voker Moshiach Umagen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah. Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Atarav Lehoshia. Morid atah, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed. Mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofech cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishanei afar, mi chamocha ba'al gevurot. V'ne'eman atah l'chayot metim. Baruch atah Adonai mechayei hametim. Nekadesh et shimecha ba'olam keshem shemakdishim oto bishmei marom. Kakatu al yad neviecha vekara ze el ze ve'amar kadosh 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 Adonai tzevaot melok kol haaretz kevodo. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מנסים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך משיח צדקך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהים ציון לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גדולך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור נגיד גדולך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. ישמח משה במנת חלקו כי אבן המן קרץ לו כי ולתפאר בראשו נתת ועמדו לפניך על הר סיני. ששבע לעשות את השבת לדורתם ואת עולם ולא מבין ישראל הוציאו לעולם כי 6 ימים עשת השם ואת הארץ ויום השביעי שבת והיו נעשה השנה כי לישראל עמך נתתם ואהבה לזרע יעקב. ברוך אבותינו רצה במנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותראה תורתך זכינו ותורך ושמותיך תהר אצלנו נפלס. עושה שלום, שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום. עושה שלום, שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום. הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום, שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום. עושה שלום, שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום. הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל
ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום, שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום.
יתגדל ויקרא שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קרתי והמליך מלכותי, וחייכון ומכון וחיי לכל בישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם לעולם היה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר וירומם וינשא, ויתרא ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלותנו והשכון, דכל ישראל, קדם אבון דשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה משמיא, וחיים עלינו וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום. עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו amen. You may be seated. Thank you again for joining us this morning. As we continue our reopening process, we are substituting our Torah reading for with Torah study. And this morning, we will be learning together for a bit. Those of you that are joining us online, the source sheet that that I'll be referring to is posted as a link in the chat and can be found there. Safaria source sheet, so you can find it there as well. And though we aren't doing a Torah reading, it's appropriate to sanctify our Torah learning with bracha, and so I invite you to join me in the bracha for Torah study, which ends with the words la'asok bedivrei Torah, to busy ourselves, to occupy ourselves with words of Torah. So please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok bedivrei Torah. And Hanaleh, would you do me a favor and hand these out to folks? Thank you. So this week's Torah portion, Parshat Korach, it comes at an appropriate moment. It seems like it happens to me often. Events in the world, events in my life, what's swirling around in the atmosphere seems to converge with the Torah reading of the week. And on Friday, yesterday, I had a wonderful visit with a congregant who wanted to engage with me in a real honest exchange about disagreement and differences of opinion and perspective in our Jewish community, and particularly here in the synagogue, as we frankly are giving consideration to my candidacy for the senior position in a year and a half. And after that wonderful conversation, I sat down to prepare for Torah study today. And of course, here comes Korach, a rebel against Moses and Aaron's leadership. Korach and 250 men, leaders of the community, come to Moses and Aaron. Korach he's identified as from the priestly clan as well, right? So Aaron and Moshe are descendants of the tribe of Levi, and Aaron, of course, is the appointed high priest. Korach is a cousin. Korach is also from the tribe of Levi, and let's take a look at our source sheet from this week's parsha. Chapter 16 of the book of Numbers of Bamidbar. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi v'Datan ve'Aviram b'nei Eliav ve'on ben Pelet b'nei Reuven. So Korach, the son of Yishar, son of Kohat, son of Levi. So the Torah is careful to tell us what this lineage is. And here they translate betook himself, because the verb in the Hebrew, vayikach Korach, he took, which is an unusual phrase here. So he took himself, along with Datan and Aviram, son of Eliav, and On, son of Pelet, descendants of Reuven, to rise up. Now, so that's significant because Reuven's also the oldest, and so there's two forms of leadership here, both the primogeniture of the first tribe, of the eldest tribe, and the tribe of Levi, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute. So in great detail to tell us these were prominent people. Let's go back into the Hebrew. Veyakalu al Moshe. They formed a community, kahal, meaning they gathered, al Moshe, on top of him. They descended upon him. Ve'al Aharon, and upon Aaron. Ve'yamru alehem, they said to them, Rav lachem, it's too much for you. How do they translate here? You've gone too far. Rav lachem. Ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. Because all of the community, all of the Edah, we're all Kedoshim, right? God had told us earlier, you are a kingdom of priests and a treasured nation. We're all holy, right? On its surface, Korach's argument in and of itself is not unreasonable. It's based in his own understanding of Torah and the experience of the Israelites in the wilderness. He says, Rav Lecha, we're all holy, but Kulam Kedoshim v'tocham Hashem. We read earlier, Asuli Mikdash v'shachanti betocham, make for me a sanctuary that I may dwell among the people. And here he's echoing those words. He's saying we're all holy, and God is in our midst, the whole people. Umadoa titnasu al kahal Adonai. And why do you raise yourself up? Why do you place yourself above us in the Lord's community, in the Lord's congregation? All right, so let's pause here a little bit and draw out this text. How do you understand Korach here? And I think we all know the outcome of this. Korach is punished for his rebellion. And I should have included a couple more verses here. It goes on to say that in the immediate response to this, do you remember how Moshe and Aaron respond? What's their response to this? They fall on their faces in silence. The initial response is silence from Moshe. He then consults with God and comes back with a challenge to Korach and his rebels. They have a little kind of spectacle to demonstrate who is favored by God, and in that they bring I believe they bring incense, and they make an offering to God. Moshe challenges them, and in the process, Korach and his gang are literally swallowed up by the earth. So we know how it ends. Korach is wrong. But what should we understand about the nature of conflict within a community from this text? What do you think? What we can draw from this? Yes, please.
I think Korach was speaking for his needs and not the needs of God and not the needs of the community. It was too self-centered, presumably too self-centered, based on his desire for power and his desire that have to be able to keep support. And really didn't look at what the overall Jewish community needed and what God cared about.
Right. So just to reiterate that Korach was too consumed with his own power, with seizing power for himself, not with the needs of the community. I mean, if his argument had been in good faith and sincere, perhaps he might say, "Hey, Moses, maybe we should take a vote, and we'll put up candidates for leadership, he's not saying anybody, like let's pick someone else. He's saying pick me, right? It's not about really some sort of ideal of democracy or of shared leadership, but he's saying, he couches it in these kind of universal terms, right? A whole community is holy. Why not? But he's really saying, why not me instead of you? So that's one possibility, and certainly reasonable interpretation. There was another question I had in mind. Any other comments on this? What's that?
I mean, he was challenging the fundamental infrastructure of what was in the Jewish world.
Right.
Moses had set up a system, which I think was after this, where we had courts and where we had a system of the tribal leadership.
Right.
Become part of what was the establishment of the Jewish people as an autonomous land, as an autonomous, and instead of trying to work within it, and instead of trying to improve it, he was challenging the fundamentals of it by calling Moses a hypocrite, by calling Moses aren't we all somehow taking the words holy and perverting them and implying that Moses and Aaron were setting themselves above to
Right.
be better and undermining and creating the fundamentals of a true rebellion where all of them said, yeah, why aren't I holy? Kill them.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about they were servants to provide for the freedom and the future and the enablement and the support of the community and the system of rules and laws and plans and ways in place. None of that didn't acknowledge, look at all the great things you did, but basically saying, are you to be above us?
Right.
This is the ultimate act of rebellion and destruction.
Thank you. So it's challenging the fundamental, structure of the system that had been set up, and it had been established at this point, a hierarchy of courts and of tribal, clan leadership. And I remember what I wanted to add as well, that I think it's significant that this happens very publicly, right? His challenge is not one of a kind of principled and respectful conversation to engage in a good faith, discussion with Moshe and Aaron, but to embarrass them in public, to challenge them in this very public way, which I think is why the response ends up being also this very public spectacle. So let's take a look at how our tradition picks up this narrative as a central trope in Jewish wisdom. The second text is from Pirkei Avot, from the Mishnah, which is a 2nd century text of rabbinic wisdom, and we find an interesting statement here in Pirkei Avot 5:17. Kol machlakot shehi l'shem shamayim sofa lehitkayem. All arguments, any argument that is for the sake of heaven's name, it is destined to endure, lehitkayem. V'she'ena l'shem shamayim ein sofa lehitkayem. But if it is not for the sake of heaven, then it is not destined to endure. Ezochi machloket l'shem shamayim. What then is a dispute for the sake of heaven? Zo machloket Hillel v'Shammai. This is the disagreement between Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai were 1st century BCE. They were really the first two major schools of rabbinic thought in the what would become Pharisaic rabbinic Judaism in the 1st century and 2nd century. These are the predecessors of the great rabbis that are writing this text a few hundred years later. They say that an argument for the sake of heaven, machloket l'shem shamayim, is the machloket between Hillel and Shammai. So Hillel and Shammai were these two schools of thought, two great leaders, great rabbis who gathered to themselves disciples and had two very different perspectives on Torah. And they're found throughout rabbinic literature as these two schools of thought. Shammai tended to be a little more rigid in his reading of law, more formalistic in how he read Torah, and Hillel tended to have a more expansive and interpretive approach to Torah. These were kind of two broad schools of thought. There's a reason why college campus organizations are called Hillel and not Shammai, because Hillel mostly won out in those arguments. But here we're told that a machloket l'shem shamayim is like the ones between the schools of Hillel and Shammai. V'she'ena l'shem shamayim, what is not l'shem shamayim? Zo machloket korach v'kol adato. So in contrast, what is not l'shem shamayim? What is an argument that is not for the sake of heaven? And the example brought is our parsha. Korach and his gang are the example of machloket that is not for God's sake. Now we'll touch a little bit upon, it's not terribly important for us to delve into Shammai and Hillel per se, but we will look at that towards the end. I'm going to kind of keep that for later. I want to stay here just in Korach. But what do you think the Mishnah means? The phrase here, sofa lahit kayem. It's not that there could have been other phrases used here, that this is a valid argument, that this is a healthy argument, but the way that it's constructed is sofa lahit kayem, its end, right, in the end it will endure, it will be established. Now what will be established? Now, I don't think it's the law, because in the end we will find out that Hillel and Shammai, somebody has to decide the law. They disagree on a number of things. For example, one of the famous cases is Shammai says that we should light our Hanukkah candles by starting with 8 candles and then counting down to 1. There's a certain logic to that. And Hillel says we light 1 candle on the first day and then we work our way up on Hanukkah. Right? We all know that we end up doing it Hillel's way. So in the end, somebody's way has to prevail. Otherwise, let's leave it there. I don't want to lead too much. But what does it mean that sofa lahit kayem? That in the end it will endure. Any thoughts there? Yes, Melanie.
It seems that it's about the process, not about the outcome. That the argument will endure, the conversation will endure. Nothing is really black and white.
That the argument will endure, the debate will endure. And then perhaps it's not black and white. So with the example of, now, we have to choose one way or the other. The alternative is that you have a community that's divided in its practice and I suppose that then leads to further division, right? So a community that can't agree on a standard practice is one that's destined to continue to pull apart. Let's continue then in our texts here. I think we can skip this Tosafot. What the Tosafot is it's not a big point that the Tosafot here is making. So let's move on to the Bartanura on the second page. Bartanura is not just delicious wines from Israel or from Italy, but it is called that because it's named after an Italian commentator, Ovadia of Bartanura, who comments on the Mishnah, probably the most common source on interpreting the Mishnah. he is commenting on this, Kol machloket shehi l'shem shamayim sofa litkayem, that a controversy for the sake of heaven, the end will endure. In the end, it will endure. That he says that is to say that the people of controversy are destined to endure and not be destroyed, as with the dispute between Shammai and Hillel and Shammai, that were not destroyed, neither they nor their students, nor the students of Hillel and Shammai, but Korach and his band perished. So we know that there's disagreement between the houses of Hillel and Shammai, and it's not all a pretty story. There's even stories in the Talmud that there was violence at times between these two schools of thought. But these schools of thought endure into this day, and we read elsewhere too that even though these two schools of thought had great disagreements between them, the rabbis, the students of these schools, nonetheless married, from among the other school of thought, which is a way of saying that they intermingled socially and stayed as one community. So he says, Ve'ani shamati perush sofa tachlita hamevukash me'inyana. I've heard the explanation that sofa, in the end, its purpose and desired, that it means its purpose and desired outcome. Right? So what does it mean that in the end it endures? The controversy which is for the sake of heaven, the purpose and aim is to arrive at the truth. And this continues to endure, as they said, that from a disagreement the truth will be revealed, as was revealed in the disputes between Hillel and Shammai, that the law was like the school of Hillel, and a controversy which is not for the sake of heaven, its purpose is to achieve power, as you said before, and the love of victory. And its end will not endure, as we find in the dispute of Korach and his band, whose aim and end goal was a lust for honor and power, and their end was the opposite. When I think about sometimes our modern politics and the arena of debate, sometimes we see it very often, that sometimes the goal seems to be to win and be vindicated, rather than to actually solve problems, right? We've come to believe that the purpose of, or that the arena of politics is the arena where people get together to bludgeon each other over power, when the purpose of politics should be that people of disparate ideas, bringing multiple perspectives, come together to solve problems, right? That the purpose of this tussle is not to see who comes out on top, but to see how we can reach some sort of understanding that helps us to solve common concerns and problems in a society. Right? So a machloket l'shem shamayim is one that has a higher purpose. The higher purpose is, let's see if we can solve some of our shared problems. I think sometimes when I listen to folks argue over policy, over cultural issues, it's become clear to me that some people really just want to be right. They don't want to govern. They just want to be right, and they do that even to the detriment of their own political aims. Right? If the aim is to actually solve a problem, then you want to get together with other people with whom you disagree and see if you can find a compromise. But if your purpose is just to signal how virtuous you are, well, good luck. I mean, that's great. You can be right. You can get up and speak and tell your opinion and feel very righteous about yourself. Great. You haven't solved anything. And you can also bludgeon your opponents with how righteous you are and how correct you think you are, and feel vindicated in the public, in the public sphere. Let's keep going. This is a wonderful text from the Kli Yakar. I forget this history of this source. I'm not sure who the Kli Yakar is. Vayikra Elokim leRakia Shamayim. So he's going to go somewhere really interesting with this one. It's a little bit long, but let's stick with it. Lo ratza Hashem sheyikra b'shem rakia, ki shem ze more al haferud vehamachlakot milashon veyikra'u b'fachei hazahav. God, so now he's saying that, so he's talking about creation, and he's talking about, God did not call God called the firmament. In the story of creation, we're first told that in the second day of creation, God set apart the firmament, the rakia. But he doesn't call it rakia. When he gives it its name, it's called shamayim, the heavens. Since that name indicates division and disagreement, as in Exodus 39:3, when we're talking about the instructions for the Mishkan, there's the verb is used. Yiraka'u means to flatten, to spread out the gold in thin plates, for that which was to cover the earth. So rakia makes sense because it's a covering for the earth, right? The atmosphere of the earth, the heavens are a covering, but that, he says, indicates division. Since any rakia is a covering that separates between two things, right? And we know this scientifically too, the atmosphere creates a kind of bubble, a separation between the earth and space. And for this reason it does not, and it also separates, from the biblical perspective, the earth from the skies. And for this reason it does not state that it was good. Right, so one of the things about the second day of creation is there's no mention that it's good, like on every other day. Since disagreement was created on it. The first act of creation, so the first day is creating light, but then the subsequent verbs, the thrust of how creation happens is a process of then taking that undifferentiated matter that begins creation, that undifferentiated energy that is Vayihi Or, and starting to differentiate it, split it apart, to create differences, and we'll talk about what that means. But he says that this is when disagreement begins, right? Because you can't have, if you have undifferentiated matter, you have nothing meaningful, right? The only way that it becomes something of meaning is if you start to create differentiation in it. And the same is true, I think in the way that we understand the world through the lens of science. Since there's no good except in a place where we have unity, where we find unity. And therefore, on the third day, that it was good is stated twice. So once for the work of the third day and once for the finishing of the water. Because on the third day we have a separation of the waters. And that was an aspect of unity. As it says, let the waters gather in one place. So now we have a separation of the waters from the heavens and a separation of the dry land from the waters. And because of this unity, that it was good is mentioned. Hey guys, good to see you. But on the second day, from which comes out all differences, and which is the beginning of all differences and disagreement, that it was good was not said about it. And God did not want that the sky should be called firmament, which indicates a cover that separates and divides between brothers. And it was called with the name heavens, shamayim, which indicates peace, since shamayim is composed of the words esh and mayim. Esh mayim, shamayim, who made peace between themselves and joined together, and from them was created skies. And this is what the rabbis of blessed memory state. Any disagreement that is for the sake of shamayim, which means to say that in other words, that any disagreement for the sake of shamayim, sofo lehitkayem, that in the end it will endure, which means to say that a disagreement whose purpose is peace, as is the teaching of the name of the Shem of God, shamayim. And that is easy to understand. I love when they say, when the commentators say that, like it should be just self-evident, this complex interpretation that they're offering. And according to its simple meaning, that it was good was not stated on the second day, since there was no new creation on it, since the firmament already created on the first day, and the reason for no creation happening on the second day is because the second day is the beginning of all difference and division. Hence the Holy One, blessed be He, did not want to implant a nature of difference in any creation. All right, so let's pause here for a moment. Why is difference necessary? Why should we have difference? I already said a little bit about it before. You can't have anything meaningful out of this creation unless you have differentiation, right? You just have a big mush, right? A big like cosmic soup. You can't. You have to. Meaning is created by starting to create differences. Now, the differences, though, are also partly an illusion, just as we understand that in science and nature as well. We're all created of the same matter. Nobody is. The stars and everything in the universe and our bodies are all made of stardust, right? They're all the same stuff that came out of the Big Bang. Now, I don't understand how that works in physics to understand the differentiation that then happens. I guess, gravity and other forces also come into play then to bring some of this matter together. But in the bringing together of that matter, there's inevitably differentiation. And meaning is created out of that differentiation. I understand myself to be me, separate from you, because I perceive a difference between us. But from the point of view of physics, there is no difference between us. We're all part of the same matter and energy. But I experience it as difference. And that difference then creates the possibility of diversity of experience, of thought, of a diversity of points of view. As soon as you start to have that differentiation, you create meaning, but you also create the possibility of conflict, of difference, right? Now you have a perspective, I have a perspective, but a machloket l'shem shamayim, he's saying this clever interpretation, shamayim is not rakia, it is not a separation, but it is a way of bringing back together that which is differentiated. So let's take a look in the next text. This helps us to understand Hillel and Shammai a little better. Eruvin. Amar Rav Yava, Amar Shmuel, Shalosh shanim nichleku Beit Shammai uBeit Hillel. For 3 years, the houses of Shammai and Hillel had vehement disagreement. They disagreed and argued. One said the halakha is like us, and the other said the halakha is like us. Finally, after 3 years, Yatzat bat kol ve'amra elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. I guess this argument got so protracted, and I'm not sure why God waits 3 years to intervene, but at some point, God breaks through a bat kol, literally, it's hard to translate literally, but it's a feminine sense of God's voice breaking through and saying, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. Both these and these are the words of the living God. So both Hillel and Shammai represent the words of the living God, and the halakha is like the house of Hillel. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim hen ve'halakha ke Beit Hillel. Not aval, not but, and. Both are the words of the living God, and the law is like Hillel. Right? So at the end of the day, somebody's got to prevail, because otherwise we're just going to continue arguing indefinitely. And God says, that's all great. Both of you are representing the words of the living God, but the law is like Hillel. Now, first of all, how can that be both the words of the living God? I mean, one says light Shabbat candles one way, the other one says Hanukkah candles one way, one says light Hanukkah candles the other way. One says that, they dispute on all sorts of issues of Jewish law. How can both be right? Now, they're not, yeah. That's right. He didn't say both are right. He said both are the words of the living God, yeah.
One thing I'm thinking about is like when I get into a disagreement or a friendly debate discussion with somebody who differs from me, often it boils down to differing values, like differing ethical points of view. That like, I'll use like an animal welfare example. Like I'm not a vegetarian because like I don't have an animal welfare perspective. Like I have a different perspective that is one of like ecosystems and much bigger ideas. And I'm never going to be able to convince you, if you have an animal welfare perspective, that like harm to any single living being is wrong, no matter what, that it's okay in some circumstances.
Right.
We have this divide that we cannot cross because we have different values and ethics. And it's not to say that mine is better than yours, or mine is right and yours is wrong. It's just that they differ. And ultimately, we live different lifestyles because of it, but we can coexist. Or some law of the land will have my ethics in some cases or your ethics in other cases, and we'll figure out how to deal with it. But the goal is not for me to make you have my ethical point of view. It's for us to be able to live together and support whatever the decision is made, even if it doesn't necessarily reflect your ethical point of view.
So you may start with different. I wonder about that. I mean, if we were, I wonder if it's really about different. Sometimes I think it's different ethics, also different priorities and concerns. So, for example, one concern might be, well, animal protein is really very efficient and tasty and helps to feed the world, right? Another might say, well, my main concern is for the welfare of animals, and like the philosopher Peter Singer, who takes a very extreme view on vegetarianism. I mean, like, you can't kill anything, not a bug, not anything, not, because all of it is life, and taking life is wrong. I don't know. That was interesting. I don't want to get caught up in that debate per se. But sometimes this represents different priorities, different concerns. Sometimes in order to have an orderly society, we just have to make room for both, right? We're not going to, so that the ethical system may just have to accept both ways as valid. Any other thoughts on this? How can both be Elu ve'elu? How can both be the words of the living God? Yeah.
Because of the process. They both were authentically interpreting the text, living real Jewish lives, and interpreting them through what they understood as the oral law. And if it's authentic and it's to make the world a better place, that fits the criterion for it to be both the word. It's the word of the living God to us. And so those are very reasonable ways to get there.
Both are making a good faith effort at discerning the intention of Torah and the intention of God, and both are aimed at the higher purpose of establishing standards and practices for the community. Now, part of it is the difference between us and God. I mean, at the end of the day, our knowledge is limited, our ability, our capacity is only human. Now, interestingly here, the bat kol comes through not to tell which one is right and wrong, which the bat kol could have done, but to say elu ve'elu, both are right, both are valid, both are the words of the living God. Both. Now, let's take a look at how the text explains explains this for us. Both these are the words of the living God. Why was the halakha established to follow the opinion of Hillel? It is because the students of Hillel were kind and gracious. They taught their own ideas as well as the ideas of the students of Shammai. Not only for this reason, but they went so far as to teach Shammai's opinions first. This strikes me as an odd reason to establish the law one way or the other, because you would think that the criteria would be who's right. But it's not about who's right in this case, it's about who has an approach that is more kind and gracious, that also in its process of explanation includes and even argues the opposite argument, that holds and respects the other. Still, I mean, why does that then make Hillel deserve the law being fixed primarily according to Hillel? There are a few cases in which Shammai prevails, but why would that be the criteria? Right, if it's about upholding a process in good faith to establish a way for the community to behave and so on, then an approach that upholds, that teaches both, honors the process. And yeah, Laura.
I was going to say that the goal is clarity instead of chaos. And the goal of the discussion from the Hillel camp is to bring both together, compare them, and define clarity instead of pitting one against the other and creating chaos.
And the goal is clarity, not chaos. But some sensibilities would say, well, then let's just erase the dissenting views. Right? If we want clarity, then let's just be very clear. Reading Jewish law is different than reading, most modern legal codes, which make very clear and don't. Well, I don't know. That's not true. In the judicial process, we maintain minority opinions too, right? So when an appellate court or explains its ruling on a law, you'll have dissenting opinions and the prevailing opinion. The dissenting opinions are recorded as well. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Do you want to elaborate?
Well, I was going to talk about the idea that the Supreme Court rulings, they also should have dissenting opinion.
Why is that?
I think because it also shows that that was taken into consideration. It wasn't just, this is right because I said it was right, but this is right in the realm of all the conversations that weighed into that process.
Yeah.
Also think about a page of Talmud, right? It has a text, but then it has all the opinions around it. Like the powers in the diversity of voice, not in the singularity of voice.
Right. The powers in the plurality of opinions that help to reach that discernment. There's also the possibility that this is the right decision right now, and a court down the road or a situation may arise that we're not anticipating and may call for that minority opinion.
Right? They might say, did you even consider this possibility? And now it's documented. So they
Right.
know that was part of the contract.
Oh, so that the completeness of the strength of the outcome is also in preserving the completeness of the conversation, because then no one can come and say later, well, you didn't take into account this other view, but we did. But I'm also saying that there may arise a time in the future when actually another court may come along and overturn its previous decision and uphold a minority opinion and bring that one up, because maybe the circumstances have changed, maybe society has changed, maybe there's a different reason for a different interpretation. Yes, please.
Are you saying then that our surroundings and the ability to have proper foresight influences the decisions we make? Because we only know what's currently happening, not what will happen in the future.
That's right. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. These are the words of the living God, and we have a living Torah. The Torah is the power of Torah, and the power of our interpretive tradition is that we are not stuck with a sort of ossified text that only exists in one moment in time, right? Even if you take the totally traditional point of view that the Torah is given at one moment in time on Mount Sinai, including all the oral law, you have built into that system the possibility that the Torah can speak to generations to come and adapt to the circumstances, right? Like, we still are interpreting Torah. We never read the Torah literally. I mean, there's no Jewish way of just opening up the Torah and saying, this is what it says. That is just a fundamentally un-Jewish way of reading Torah. We always read Torah through an interpretive tradition, aware of all of the discussions and debates that have happened over hundreds of years. It never just says what it says, right? And the power, now that creates, from a lot of outsider perspectives, Jewish law looks kind of chaotic, right? It looks kind of wishy-washy, and like we're always stuck in constant debates, and there are certain laws in the Torah that frankly the rabbis never come to a conclusion on. They actually just say teku, that's it. Like, we don't know what the right interpretation is. When the Messiah comes, we'll have clarity on this one, right? And we preserve even those inconclusive debates. The power, now there's a bit of chaos in that, but there's also a power in that, because the Torah is flexible enough to meet the challenges of every generation. There's all sorts of stuff now. Just yesterday I had an interesting conversation about burial practices, because there are now lots of ways that people are getting buried, and how does Jewish law deal with some of these different methods that our ancestors could never have anticipated, right? I also think about reproductive health, and like our ancestors could never have anticipated things like in vitro fertilization, or and what the status of a child is that is, whose genetic makeup is maybe from Jewish parents carried by a surrogate mother who's not Jewish, right? Or even the circumstance we have now. Our ancestors could never have anticipated people davening remotely over the internet. Can that really be counted as a minyan when people are not in physical proximity with each other, but they can hear and see each other in real time? I mean, our law is flexible enough, and our interpretive tradition gives authority to humans to apply that law in ways that our ancestors never could have anticipated. So what does that mean then for communal leadership? I think for community leaders, the challenge is to lead with conviction and with principles, and also respect the opinions of the diverse community that they lead, to honor and respect differences of opinion, and even encourage that debate within a community, not to create more chaos and division, but actually to uphold elu ve'elu. Both these and these can be the words of the living God, and that we can come together as community to respect one another, even not despite our differences, but because of our differences. Because part of elu ve'elu is that none of us has the whole truth. Shammai and Hillel don't have the whole truth, but when we preserve their opinions together, we have something closer to a more complete understanding, right? God never says one is right and one is wrong. For the sake of community, one of them sometimes has to prevail, but it's elu ve'elu. Both are the words of the living God, and both can be respected. So I came across a text that really made me chuckle, and just in the context of where I'm at the moment, I just thought it was kind of funny. So this is from the Mishnah Brura, which is a relatively when's Mishnah Brura? Mishnah Brura is the Chavetz Chaim wrote it in I can't remember, maybe the 18th century. I'm terrible at those kind of things, but it's a late compendium of Jewish law that comes to bring together a lot of the codes that had been written in the medieval period. So he says it's talking about the appropriateness of a shaliach tzibur, which is a prayer leader. Here they translate it as chazan. It's not exactly that. Not thinking about like somebody with a pretty voice who gets up and does kol nidre, but somebody who's a leader of the community. Shiploni chazan. That so-and-so should be a chazan. He's commenting, I'm not exactly sure where, but it having to do with the choice of a shaliach tzibur. היום שיודע שבעולם הזה הרבה מחזיקים במחלוקת. Today, when it is known that in our great sinfulness, many among us perpetuate dispute without any reason, and their intention is not for the sake of heaven. If we had to ask each and every individual regarding the matter of appointments, either of appointing a prayer leader or a teacher or a judge, etc., consensus would never be reached. Which I think is just funny, because that's just true in Jewish community today. They say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. A community of hundreds of families, you're going to have thousands of opinions. And if you rely on some sort of consensus, you're never gonna reach it, because you're just going to have too many different opinions. If we had to ask each and every individual regarding the matter of appointment, then consensus would never be reached. Therefore, we follow the majority of, they translated in here, I might have translated it differently, taxpayers. It says, Rov Pura'e Hamas. So mas in the context of the society they're living in is not taxes per se, but the people who contribute to the needs of the community, which in our context would be something like taxes. Even if there are invalid relatives among them, meaning that so we rely on those who contribute to the upkeep of the community, even if among them there's some conflicts of interest, right? They might be related to one another. You might have a father and a daughter on a board of directors, for example. And now that the custom is to follow the 7 benefactors, this is a context also of medieval community, but that you've got some leaders of the city, or that those who are chosen by the community all follow local customs so that disputes do not multiply. In other words, the decision about choosing communal leadership is left to a cadre of people who are most invested in the upkeep of the community, because if you had to ask everybody, you would never reach consensus. So this just kind of seemed timely to me. I also included in here for you some, why would that be? I mean, why would that be? That we would leave it to some select group of people.
It's the same model we use in our government. Everybody's not out there voting
Right.
every time we want to, raise taxes or,
Right, we don't have direct democracy.
Exactly. And direct democracy is an absolutely unworkable solution.
Yeah.
Because at some point, somebody else, those decisions have to get made. And if direct democracy is the solution, you're spending hours and hours counting votes and not actually making progress forward.
Right, so on the one hand, it's a waste of time. It may be chaotic. You may not be able to reach consensus. But I would also add that you also, I grew up in California, where we have a lot of direct democracy with the silly initiatives. Really, it's just a way for legislatures to abrogate their responsibility to lead. Because what you end up getting is a lot of people with, first of all, you get legislation written in really uninformed ways, and you're relying on people who have very little engagement with really complex issues. And what you often need in a representative democracy, you need people who have some expertise, some experience with not only the process, but with the content of the issues, who actually spend time digging deep into the complexities of public policy, and not everyone's equipped to do that. So we appoint people who we trust, ideally, to represent us in doing that hard work. And hopefully we get better outcomes as a result. So I gave you also a couple of essays here of additional material that I think you'll find interesting. Feel free to take this home and enjoy your learning. So thank you for giving me this time to learn together. We're going to conclude our service soon, and we may still have some time to join Elliot Starosta and his family in celebrating becoming bar mitzvah. So let's conclude our service now on page 204. Actually, what I'd like to do, which I think is appropriate after, always after study, normally if we were doing a Torah service, we would do Kaddish Shalem. I'd like to offer instead a Kaddish de Rabbanan, which is appropriate after learning. And those that wish to follow along can find that on page 38. And this is also an appropriate Kaddish for mourners. So if you're a mourner, if it is your custom to rise, I'll ask you to please rise. Yitgadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'galav v'zman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei kudsha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidei Hon ve'al kol Talmidei Hon ve'al kol man de'oskin be'oraita di ve'atra dein ve'di bechol atar ve'atar Yehei lohon ulechon shlama rabba, china vechista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin, u'mezona revicha, u'forkana min kadam avohon bishmaya v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayin tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, u'berachamav yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. And we'll turn now to page 204 in the left-hand margin. Ein Keloheinu in Hebrew and Ladino. Ein Keloheinu,
Ein Kadoneinu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, non como nuestro Dios, non como nuestro Señor, non como nuestro Rey, non como nuestro Salvador. Mi Keloheinu, mi Kadoneinu, mi Kemalkeinu, ¿Quién como nuestro Señor? ¿Quién como nuestro Rey? ¿Quién como nuestro Salvador? No del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Eloheinu, no del Moshienu. Oremos nuestro Dios, oremos nuestro Señor, oremos nuestro Rey, oremos nuestro Salvador. Bendito nuestro Señor, bendito nuestro Rey, bendito nuestro Salvador. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Tú sos nuestro Dios, tú sos nuestro Señor, tú sos nuestro Rey, tú sos nuestro Salvador. Atahu Shektiru, Avotenu, Lefanehai, Ketoret Hasamim, Yai-da-da-da-da-da, 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 Yai-da-da-da-da-da.
Aleinu followed by Mourner's Kaddish, page 205. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latei kedula leotzer reishit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שם שמיים יוסר ארץ משגור שמו ידעת יום השבות אל ואחר אל כנקבל חנן אלוהים וירמנו את ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו echad. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 207. We invite mourners here and at home to remain standing along those for whom it is your custom. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael b'galau v'zman kariv v'imru amen Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam ulmei maya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha brichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Before we conclude, I'll just let you know, again, we wish a mazal tov to Elliot Starosta, who is celebrating becoming bar mitzvah at the traditional service this morning. And we congratulate Naomi and Yaron, his parents, as well as his extended family, and thank them for sponsoring our Kiddush today. And we wish a mazal tov to Peyton Jacobs, who will be celebrating this evening her bat mitzvah. On Friday night, Azamra Musical Kabbalat Shabbat, Cantor Green will be back, thank God, and please register to attend. We will be, weather permitting, holding that out in the sukkah, so it'll be lovely in the evening, and we are hosting a picnic-style dinner, so it's bring your own, still with COVID precautions. We invite families to bring their own dinner. So register for that online. Let's see. Tomorrow, Sunday, there will be a forum for the Rabbinic Selection Committee. Cohen's Cuisine wants to celebrate 4th of July with you. Check out the Cohen's Cuisine website for orders for Independence Day. And the Cohen's Cuisine is donating 10% of proceeds to HEA. New adult education offerings are coming out. Check your email and the website for that. We are forming a High Holy Day choir, and we are looking for singers 12 and up to participate in a musical choir to accompany our services in the traditional service at the direction of Leah Peer. So if you're interested in that, please check out the website. First rehearsals will be Tuesday evenings, 7 to 9, beginning July 6th through August 31st. June 25th, we'll be celebrating, kicking off a weekend of Pride Shabbat to honor and celebrate inclusion of LGBTQ people in the Jewish community and in the world. The JCC is hosting a community event of which we will be a part with a potluck dinner service at 5 p.m. and dinner at 6 p.m. on Friday, June 25th. And check out the website for other stuff, including signing up to attend services. It probably won't be much longer that we will be requiring reservations for services, but for the time being, please do that on our website, headenver.org. And do we have a melody we'd like to close with? Or?
Whatever you want. Do you want to do Sanctuary Song?
Sure. I invite you to please rise. May the words of my mouth and the meditation
meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Yah, my rock and my redeemer. Oh Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and in thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Ve'asuli mikdash ve'shachanti betocham v'anachnu nevarech Yah me'ata ve'ad olam. Shabbat shalom, everyone.